What happens when one of the sharpest comedians in the world sits down with a host who refuses to let anyone else have the last word? In just 34 seconds, a casual chat turned into one of the most explosive moments in talk show history. Ricky Gervais walked onto the set expecting a routine interview, some laughs, a few witty remarks, a little promotion, and done. But sitting across from him was Piers Morgan, wearing that trademark smirk that always promised trouble. The interview started harmlessly. Piers asked about Ricky's comedy specials, cancel culture, and fame. Ricky answered with quick humor and sharp honesty. The audience laughed. The lights felt warm. Everything looked normal. Then Piers leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "You know what your problem is, Ricky? You think you're smarter than everyone else in the room." Ricky chuckled, not out of nerves, but amusement. The irony was too good. "That's rich," he said, smiling, coming from a guy who interrupts his own guests to hear himself talk. The crowd erupted with that familiar "oh." Piers didn't like that. His jaw tightened. His fingers drummed on the desk. "I'm a journalist," Piers snapped, his tone sharp now. "I hold people accountable. That's my job." "Right," Ricky replied. "And how did that work out at that tabloid you used to run? You know, before the phone hacking thing." Silence. The kind that sucks the air out of a room. Everyone knew Ricky had hit a nerve. Piers blinked, shifted in his seat, and tried to redirect. "We're not talking about that," he said quickly. "We're here to talk about you." "No, mate," Ricky said calmly. "You brought up accountability. Let's talk about it. You want to lecture comedians, but your own industry literally spied on people." The audience froze. Piers' face went red. His voice rose an octave. "That's got nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this," Ricky replied. "You act like you're the moral compass of society, but you can't even face your own past." That was the first crack. You could see Piers' composure slipping, his control fading. He leaned forward, voice trembling with anger, and said through gritted teeth, "You don't know what you're talking about." Ricky smiled, unfazed. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. And so does everyone watching." The studio was thick with tension. Piers Morgan's face had gone crimson, his jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. He tried to recover, but Ricky sat there, completely calm, the eye of the storm. Piers pointed at him sharply. "I will not sit here and be disrespected on my own show," he barked. Ricky didn't flinch. "Mate," he said softly, "I haven't disrespected you. I've just refused to pretend you're something you're not. There's a difference." That single line hit harder than any punch. The crowd gasped. A few even laughed nervously. Piers slammed his hand on the armrest. "Get him off my set," he shouted suddenly, his voice echoing off the studio walls. The producers hesitated. This wasn't in the plan. The cameras were live. Millions were watching. Throwing a guest off air mid-interview? That never happened. But Piers was past reasoning. His ego had taken over. He pointed toward the exit, his voice trembling with fury. "Now." Ricky rose slowly, brushing imaginary dust off his jacket. He looked around the room, then straight into the camera. "Well," he said with that classic smirk, "I guess we know who the real snowflake is, don't we?" The audience erupted. Laughter, applause, disbelief. Piers was fuming, eyes blazing, as producers rushed forward, unsure whether to escort Ricky or simply follow him. Ricky walked off casually, like a man leaving a dinner party that had gone a bit awkward. Before stepping off stage, he turned one last time. "Thanks for having me, Piers," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's been absolutely delightful." Piers stood frozen. His own show, hijacked, flipped, and exposed in front of millions. He sat back down heavily, fumbling for words. He took a shaky breath and faced the camera. "Well," he said, forcing a strained smile, "that was unfortunate. Ricky Gervais. Ladies and gentlemen, a man who clearly can't handle a real conversation." But no one was buying it. The audience wasn't. The viewers at home weren't. Everyone had just seen what really happened. They saw who lost control, who shouted, who threw a guest out because he couldn't handle being challenged. As Piers stumbled into the next segment, the energy in the room was dead. Every laugh track felt hollow. Every smile looked fake. The once confident host sat there, trapped under the weight of his own meltdown. Let's rewind. Back to the start, when things still looked normal, when the smiles were fake. But the tension was already real. The warning signs had been there all along. When Ricky first walked onto the stage, Piers greeted him with a handshake and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. The audience clapped. The lights were warm, but beneath it all, there was a flicker of rivalry. Piers had something to prove. Maybe he'd heard stories, how Ricky outsmarts interviewers, how he refuses to play along. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe Piers just didn't like that Ricky Gervais was funnier, quicker, and more respected than him. Whatever it was, you could feel it from the first exchange. The first few minutes went smoothly. Safe questions, polite laughter. But then Piers shifted gears. "Do you ever worry your comedy goes too far?" he asked, with that sly smirk. "That maybe you cross lines that shouldn't be crossed?" It was a trap, the kind of question meant to corner the guest, make them defend themselves. Ricky recognized it instantly. He smiled. "No," he said simply. Piers blinked. "That's it. Just no. What else do you want me to say?" Ricky shrugged. "I think about it, sure. But I don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I know what I mean. If people don't get it, that's their problem." The audience laughed. Piers didn't. "But don't you have a responsibility?" he pressed. "As someone with a platform?" "To who?" Ricky shot back. "To people who were never going to find me funny anyway. My only responsibility is to be honest, not to make everyone comfortable." "So you don't care if you offend people?" Piers asked, trying to sound righteous. "I didn't say that," Ricky replied calmly. "I care about people's feelings. But I won't let the most sensitive person in the room decide what everyone else is allowed to laugh at." The crowd applauded. Piers' fake smile twitched. "But surely," he said, "some topics should be off limits." "According to who?" Ricky asked. "You?" The silence that followed said everything. Piers opened his mouth, searching for an answer, and found none. For a moment, the power dynamic flipped. The host looked like the guest, and the guest looked like the one in charge. Piers finally broke the silence. "Well, I think we can all agree that mocking someone's disability is cruel," he said, his tone dripping with self-importance. "Sure," Ricky replied, "if you're doing it to hurt them. But what if you're using humor to expose society's hypocrisy? What if the joke isn't about the person, but about how others treat them? Context matters. Intention matters." Piers crossed his arms. "It depends on how you do it." "Exactly," Ricky said, pointing at him. "Which means there are no hard rules. You can't draw a line and say, nothing beyond this point. Comedy isn't black and white. It's nuance, and you hate that because you can't control it." The audience clapped again. Piers glanced toward them, irritation flashing in his eyes. "I find it fascinating," he said sarcastically, "that you of all people are talking about control. You, who block people on social media the second they criticize you." Ricky chuckled. "Blocking someone on Twitter isn't censorship, Piers. It's self-care. I don't need to listen to idiots all day. That's not silencing. That's cleaning up the noise." "So anyone who disagrees with you is an idiot?" "No," Ricky replied, patient as ever. "Smart people with good arguments are fine. But people who twist your words or argue in bad faith, yeah, I don't owe them my time. And you, by the way, block people all the time." "That's different," Piers snapped. "How?" Ricky asked. He didn't have an answer. The audience laughed, sensing the collapse. Then Piers made his fatal mistake. His voice hardened. "The difference is that I actually matter. I'm a real journalist. You're just a comedian." The room fell silent. Every face turned toward Ricky. He sat there, still as stone, then slowly smiled. "You think you're better than me?" he asked softly. "You think what you do is more important than what I do?" "It is," Piers said flatly. "Comedy is entertainment. Journalism is truth." "Truth," Ricky echoed. "You want to talk about truth? You've printed lies that ruined lives. When I mess up, it's just a bad joke. When you mess up, someone suffers. So maybe come down off that high horse." Piers exploded. "How dare you?" he shouted. "How dare I?" Ricky said, standing now. "You invited me here, insulted me, and now you can't handle being challenged." That was it, the final spark. Piers called for security. Ricky smiled one last time. "Remember this moment," he told the camera. "He only supports free speech when people agree with him." Then he walked off, calm, victorious, while Piers Morgan stood red-faced in the ruins of his own show.